Hello, my name is Radoslaw Malinowsky, and it is my pleasure to present a paper on religion and human trafficking. The paper is based on my experience working as an academic, as a member of the faculty of Tangaza University College, located in Nairobi, Kenya, but also as executive director, founder of a non-governmental organization called HAART Kenya, organization that is committed towards the fight of human trafficking in Kenya and in East Africa. My paper is titled When Faith Can Kill But Also Heal, Religion and Human Trafficking Nexus. And I want to invite you to follow my presentation that I prepared on PowerPoint. For this, I'm going to share my screen. I hope you can all see that. I was inspired to develop this paper by a masterwork in peacebuilding studies, quite an old book written by Scott Appleby, who analyzed the impact of religion on peacebuilding, on conflict, and his work was widely published, widely discussed, called The Ambivalence of the Sacred. And I believe I was wondering whether, when I was reading that document, whether we can actually apply his ideas, his thesis for the field of migration, for the field of human trafficking. Appleby examines the paradox of religion inspiring some to become violent combatants, while other peace builders. He's wondering why the same sacred text, why the same religious passages can inspire some to do good things, to be peace builders, to deliver peace, while others to be terrorists. And he's very critical that such things are common to across religions. There is no one religion that is bad and others good. All religions, they have a capacity to promote peace, and at the same time, all religions, they have a capacity to promote violence. So the question is that, according to Scott Appleby, we are talking that religion has a concept or component of a sacred. Of course, we are talking about the social aspect of religion. I encourage you to read that book. To read that book is a very, very well written and very important for the studies of religion. And the concept of the sacred, the kind of relation between the believers and the religion itself, the sacred is either a killer or a healer. In other way, the people interpret the sacred passage, what is the most important religion, in different ways. And that means that religion can create peace builders, peacemakers, peacekeepers, and bombers and terrorists. And of course, the crucial role for us, for the leaders and for others, is how to make people interpret the sacred in a way that is desired. Now, can we apply that concept to human trafficking? Can we say that religion plays a role that can be good, at the same time can be bad? And it's true. We realize that when we study the role of religion, and I base my assumption on religions in East Africa, we can see that the role of religion towards migration, towards human trafficking, towards irregular migration is similar to the one of peace building. Religion can be a catalyst to mobilize people to fight human trafficking, to inspire strong abolition movements. At the same time, religion can inspire people to be trafficked. Some people are indeed trafficked because of their faith, because of their beliefs. Religion triggers some processes that make people actually being victims of human trafficking, as odd as it sounds. Now, to discuss that, I want us to go a little bit into the history and analyze religion and slavery in East Africa. When I mean East Africa, I mean like the greater East Africa that also includes Sudan. And we have to say that although human trafficking is a new phenomenon, it was in the past in the form of slavery. And when you look at the slavery, historical East Africa used to be always a place of recruitment and transportation on slaves, and sometimes also exploitation of slaves. And in my paper, I don't want to now stop and analyze some aspects of human trafficking and slavery relationship. Of course, we understand that slavery is more a historical phenomenon, while human trafficking is a modern form of slavery. However, there are discussions and schools who argue that human trafficking is bigger than slavery. Others that argue that it is something that replaced the slavery. For example, the government of United Kingdom promotes a new model, modern slavery. I like to simplify that and simply base my argument on the fact that human trafficking is indeed part of the slavery. So when you look at the East Africa region, we see that slavery used to be one of the major economic activities of the people living here, but also foreigners who are coming as traders and sailors. We can look at the great slave roads that used to go across the river Nile. They used to connect the heart of Africa with the Mediterranean basin, as well as the Arabic Peninsula, as well as Red Sea and Indian Ocean. The slavery used to flourish basically till the beginning of 19th century, where the slowly colonial powers who were attempting to colonize African continent ended the slave trade and exploitation of people through slavery. Now, what was the role of religion that played in that time? Sometimes we are eager to jump into conclusions that assume that religion was in fact involved across different beliefs. What I mean is that as long as slave traders, often Arab slave traders, which means Muslim slave traders, they had a control over the coast and key towns in East Africa. The slavery was flourishing. As soon as colonial powers, Christian colonial powers such as France, Germany, or Britain, when they came to East Africa, slavery slowly disappeared. But I am afraid that is not the true picture. And as much as I am a Christian and I'm a Catholic, I think that religion and slavery had a different meaning, different dimension in that time. I want to use example. I want to skip, for example, Portuguese period, obvious period where Portuguese Christian colonials and traders, they were very much okay with trading with slaves. I want to go a little bit further into the history and analyze the incident that happened actually at the beginning of Middle Ages, when in today's Sudan we had a Christian kingdom called Makuria or Nubia, and that kingdom received its Christian faith from Egypt. And later, when Egypt became a Muslim, when Egypt was conquered by Arab invasion, Nubian kingdom opposed the new religion to the extent that the Arab conquerors of Egypt decided to launch an invasion on Nubia, invasion that was a failure, that ended with defeat of Arab invaders, and invasion that inspired both parties to sign a contract called BACT, as you can see on my slides. Now, the BACT contract was unique in a way that it was signed between a Muslim world, Muslim empire, and a Christian kingdom. It was one of the unique contracts signed in that time. And basically that contract gave a guarantee of peace to the Nubian Christian side. Both parties, both sides, they agreed to engage peacefully in trade, avoid wars, return fugitives, and so on. And both sides agreed to have a certain volume of trade. Now, Christian kingdom of Nubia agreed to deliver slaves to Egypt, while Egyptian side, Muslim side, agreed to deliver certain goods such as carpets, wines, food, wheat, also horses, and so on. Now, it sounds that there was a lack of balance. Of course, you cannot trade people for goods. And it sounds, to the extent that some scholars, some Muslim scholars, develop an idea that that agreement between Christians and Muslims was actually not an agreement signed between equal parties. It was an agreement signed between a superpower and the vassal kingdom that was almost conquered. It's not true again. Fun enough, we realize that when we analyze the socioeconomic milieu of that time, we realized that it was most likely a Christian side that pushed for slaves to be delivered by Nubia. In other words, Nubians were very okay with delivering Christians simply because even before Islam arrived in Egypt, Christian kingdom of Nubia had no problem in delivering slaves to the Christian lords and nobles of Egypt who used to buy those slaves and trade with them. Some of them were captives of wars, some of them were citizens of Nubia. And that shows that religion played a different role than we often think. That religion actually was quite detached from the divisions, and when it comes to slavery, religion was something that did not have a clear impact as we wish to believe. Okay? So the fact that Nubian Christians did not hesitate to deliver human cargo to the Muslim neighbors, simply because it was part of the trade, it was the good, human cargo, slaves were just a good that was easily available in the region, and they were used to trade with Egypt long before Islam emerged. It tells us that religion played little or no role in that time when it comes to slavery. Now, but that is the case. Is this the case today? Can we say that such a position of religion repeats nowadays? I think it has changed, or maybe we have more sources that give us better analysis, because also when we analyze medieval Nubia, medieval Islam, we have a scarcity of resources, especially the scarcity of resources on the Nubian side. And lack of resources does not allow us to examine in depth the relation between religion and slavery. So when you look at the human trafficking, we have to remember that it is a global thing, global phenomenon. It used to exist in the beginning of 20th century, but it became a real problem after the end of Cold War era. Well, basically, we can say at the beginning of 90s of the 20th century. It became the third illegal trade after drugs and arms. And today, according to UN estimates, because we don't have exact statistics, we can say that up to 40 million people are trafficked annually across the globe. 40 million people, 40 million slaves are trafficked every year globally. When it comes to our region, human trafficking happens within each country. Some people are trafficked domestically, others they are trafficked across the boundaries. Some people even are trafficked outside, for example, from East Africa to Asia, or to Europe, or to United States. Others are brought to East Africa, and Kenya plays the central role in that process. For example, there's a number of victims from Nepal, from India, from other Asian countries that is delivered to Kenya every year annually. Now, before we go to discuss the concept of human trafficking and religion, I want to clarify a little bit what is the definition of what do we mean by human trafficking. We operate with the most common definition that was captured by international law, by the protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking persons, especially women and children, supplementing the United Nations Convention against transnational organized crime. And that document is domesticated by all East African countries, with the exception of Somalia. The definition that is captured by this protocol, it's repeated also in the many international national laws, is a bit technical, because according to this definition, trafficking in persons shall mean the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring or receipt of persons by means of the threat or use of force or other forms of coercion, of abduction, of fraud, of deception, of the abuse of power, or of a position of vulnerability, of the giving or receiving payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person for the purpose of exploitation. And then definition gives us different components of exploitation, different forms of exploitation, such as sexual exploitation, forced labor and services, slavery and practices similar to slavery, servitude, or the removal of organs. Of course, those are just examples. When we analyze this definition, we often categorize different elements, and we basically agree that the concept of human trafficking can be captured into three components: act, means, and purpose. By act, we mean different activities, different human activities such as recruitment, transportation, exploitation. By means, we mean the manipulation of consent through, for example, threat, danger, use of force, and then purpose, which is always exploitation. So, clarifying after what human trafficking is, which some people, they say, to make it even simpler, they say human trafficking is basically movement of people for the purpose of exploitation. Now we can move to the concept of religion. I believe that religion plays way more important role that we imagine. I gave example of slavery and religion in the past, and the assumptions we have that basically religion was quite neutral to human trafficking, to slavery in Middle Ages. But I believe that this was also because the lack of resources, lack of adequate data. Nowadays, religion plays different role, also because human trafficking also differs somehow from slavery. And I find a lot of sense in what Scott Appleby says. I think we can apply the argument of Scott Appleby to the field of human trafficking. I strongly believe that migration, human trafficking, also human smuggling has a lot to do with religion, also because religion plays a key role, very important role in the life of people living in East Africa. We can see on the map both Christians and Muslims meeting actually in East Africa. East Africa is a meeting point for many different religions. We shouldn't forget also that when we mean religion, we also mean African traditional religions. And analyzing the role of religion, I want to make an assumption and a statement that religion plays both a positive and at the same time negative role when it comes to trafficking people. That religion is a catalyst, it inspires people to fight human trafficking, but also it is a motive, it is a great inspiration for those who traffic and those who are trafficked. Now, let us discuss the first component, when religion inspires counter-trafficking actions. As in the past, we can see that many people, many first activists and agents of counter-trafficking are the people inspired by religion. And that goes back to the abolition movement even in 19th and 20th century, where many missionaries, many religious people, they actively campaigned against slavery. In Africa, we can mention, for example, Cardinal Lavigerie, the Comboni missionaries, white fathers, as well as a number of Protestant missionaries who spearheaded, who challenged the very popular and very profitable trade of slavery. The reason for that is that for religious people, for people inspired by religion, human trafficking, slavery, it is a grave violation of human rights, but also grave violation of human dignity. And it questions the whole faith, questions the call those people have to fight for a better world, to deliver gospel, or to deliver the religious ideas. And as the example of that commitment today, it's of course in the realm of structured religions, can be mentioned the Pope Francis activities and his work with other religious leaders. For example, that work that contributed to the development of the joint declaration of religious leaders against modern slavery. That declaration brings together different religions from different corners of the world, and that declaration promotes and inspires people to promote the fight against human trafficking. The call specifically encourages people inspired by religion to engage in awareness, to engage in reconciliation, to engage in rehabilitation of victims, to engage in rescuing victims of trafficking, but also to engage in lobbying and fighting for the better laws, better policies, and better application of international law on human trafficking. Besides the declaration, we have also other commitments that are coming from the realm of religion. For example, again, Pope Francis encouraged Pontifical Academy for Science for judges and prosecutors to have annual meetings that are organized on human trafficking. And in fact, the 2019 edition specifically organized the meeting for African women judges and prosecutors. And the concept is those meetings will serve as a platform to discuss better approach to victims of human trafficking, to create a better environment for those who are trafficking, and to have better policies against traffickers. So those are the examples of the leadership of different religions, but you have to remember that besides official movements, besides the religious using diplomacy and religious leaders using their positions, there are many individual campaigns, attitudes, interventions that make people, religious and lay, working against human trafficking, and the work of these people is inspired by faith. And that work is on both Christian and Muslim sides, on people who are coming from all kinds of religions. Well, we could end our presentation here and say that, wow, religion is indeed making a progress against human trafficking. But the question is now, can we say that religion also inspires the opposite? Can religion inspire human trafficking? So can religion be an agent of trafficking? Unfortunately, we must say yes. And when we analyze the examples of religion interaction with human trafficking, we realize that there are cases where religion becomes a promoter of human trafficking. And again, we cannot blame any religion. There is not one religion that can be branded as a religion that promotes human trafficking. That happens across different religions in East Africa. Well, I think that when we analyze that role of religion, we need to separate two examples or two cases. First, where subjective perception of faith leads to human trafficking vulnerability, when it is more to do with the subjective perception of people who believe in sacred. And the second example is where shared interpretation of faith contributes to human trafficking. When we say shared interpretation of faith, it means that it is more like faith that is somehow shared by different people in a certain group. It is not subjective anymore. For the first case, the subjective perception of faith that increases the vulnerability to human trafficking, it is possible when victims of trafficking mistakenly they make a mistake and they take trafficker offer as God intervention. For example, it happened several times that people attend different religious meetings, like overnight prayers, and they pray for change. And after the change supposed to happen, they meet a trafficker. Often the trafficker collaborates with those churches, and they take the offer of a trafficker as a God's intervention. Of course, you cannot blame religion for that, but yes, you blame somebody's perception on God intervention, God work, and often it results in a situation where somebody believes in the trafficker to the extent that doubting trafficker means doubting God. That is why such people, they are easily trafficked, because they, till the last moment, they collaborate with traffickers. They believe that all that is happening to them, the miracle of the job that came from human traffickers, is actually a gift from God that cannot be rejected. And if you reject that, you will actually condemn yourself. Only when those people reach the last phase of trafficking, when they be presented with exploitation, the eyes are opened, but unfortunately it's too late. Religion played its role, it played as inspiration. Sometimes we wonder how it's possible that people get lured by traffickers. Well, in some cases, it is the work of the faith of these people. They simply believe in trafficker almost equally as they believe in God. They think that trafficker is somebody who acts as agent of God. Another example is when people holding religious positions, they use the status to gain trust from victims of human trafficking. The example of Pentecostal Bishop Gilbert Deya, who used to be known internationally for trafficking children, by manipulating his believers to believe that what he's actually creating is miracle babies, is, for example, one of the examples that some people using religion to traffic. It was proved beyond any doubt that Gilbert Deya actually used to bring children, traffic children, and manipulate the people who used to receive them to tell them that actually those are miracle babies. It was very difficult to convince those people that those miracle babies are actually stolen babies. Why? Because of the faith. Another example is when agents of traffickers, they use supernatural powers related to religious rituals. That happens when people specifically, that happens when people mobilize the victims through during the recruitment stage. And again, that happens quite a number of cases across the region. We recorded cases of people in Nigeria, in West Africa, but also in East Africa region, being recruited through spiritual rituals. Victims are taken to witch doctors who sign a spiritual contract, often with the use of blood, often with the use of other artifacts. And victims recruited through that spiritual procedure, they really believe that whatever happens, they cannot violate the contract. Even if they are trafficked, even if they are abused during trafficking, they know they made a mistake of trusting, and it is better to suffer during the trafficking. It's better to be abused than violate the contract, because the consequence of violating the contract is very dire. It's going to cause them life or death. That happened several times to our victims who were trafficked abroad, victims who from Kenya, from the region, who were taken to different countries and they were exploited in those countries there. Another method, the last method, that shows that religion can be used in human trafficking is when victims are trafficked by religious violent extremists, such as Islamic terrorists, who often use us versus them method in justifying enslavement and exploitation of people. We know that different extremist groups, even though they are rejected by their own religion, such as the terrorists of Al-Shabaab, they're using religious verses and they use religion For example, to justify enslavement and exploitation, they believe that as long as you are exploiting other members of other religions, you are justified. Your own religion allows you to enslave, to rape, to kill, to make people suffer. A classical us versus them method used in the religious setup. Now, does it mean that religion can do better? Well, can we do better? Can religion improve? Can religion increase the capacity to fight human trafficking and inspire more their own people who believe? And at the same time, can religion minimize those instances of human trafficking through religion? Well, I believe yes. It is a paradox that religion can inspire human trafficking, but I believe there is a lot of improvement that is waiting for us, people who believe in God, and we can do better. Also, that is a job, a task for lay people, for people who are ordinary believers, but also people who are engaged in the leadership. For example, there is the lack of spiritual assistance for victims of trafficking is one of the critical moments that needs to be introduced across different religions. Many people they need spiritual assistance, they require spiritual assistance, yet there are not enough trained religious leaders and a religious person who can offer such assistance. That also links us to another possibility. We need to also think about how engage religious leaders and members of religious groups in training for human trafficking. Like we need people working in mosques, in parishes, in different places that are run by the religious affiliated people, to be experts on identifying human trafficking, creating awareness on human trafficking, and stopping, preventing human trafficking, as well as rescuing and rehabilitating victims of trafficking. Now, as we know, migration is a part of globalization. Migration, it's growing despite many efforts of many people trying to stop migration streams. Migration is likely to grow, and human trafficking is a part of migration. It is something that is we can call unwanted, unsafe migration, and we need to join our efforts, and we need to use all our means we have. Also, religious people and people who believe to stop that unwanted part of migration. Religion in Africa indeed has the potential to be a very effective agent of counter-trafficking, and we can all make it something that can heal rather than kill, using again Scott Appleby language. Religion can indeed heal victims of human trafficking, make them survivors rather than kill them. With this, I want to end my presentation. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope I can open somehow a discussion on the better use of religion in fighting one of the greatest, the worst crimes in our time, human trafficking. One more time, thank you for your attention.